We all know this feeling when Friday night comes around. There's a sense of relief. The week's been a grind and finally we can switch off. You spend the weekend chilling out, doing whatever feels easiest, and it feels pretty good in the moment. But when you look back over the past 6 months, you realize that every weekend has been almost exactly the same and you're no closer to the life that you actually want. My name's Eddie and I used to live in this loop myself for years but got sick of playing it safe, moved to Brazil to build the life I actually wanted, and now my mission is helping guys build their own version of the same thing. And in this video I'm going to show you in detail why the vast majority of guys get stuck in this cycle and what you need to actually do to take control of your time and energy. So first of all, why do we end up falling into this weekend escape loop almost on autopilot? There's a few different reasons that I'm going to go into, but the easiest way of understanding this is by thinking of your week as a pressure cooker, specifically a stress and stimulation pressure cooker. You start Monday fresh, but as the week goes on, things start to pile up. Work, stress, decision making, busy schedules, it starts to feel overwhelming. And on top of this, every time there's a gap in your day, you stimulate yourself with technology. You check your phone, watch something, and then you get home and do exactly the same thing. And this is where most guys get it wrong. They think this helps them relax and reset, but it's actually doing the opposite, overloading them with more and more stimulation, getting poured straight into this pressure cooker. And then by the time Friday night comes, the pressure's built up so much that it has to go somewhere. And we all know where it goes. Your brain doesn't reach for the healthiest option. It grabs whatever's easiest and lowest effort. Netflix, drinking, smoking weed, porn, eating junk food, or even more scrolling. The pressure gets released temporarily, but you become dependent on these things just to switch off. And then Monday comes along and the exact same thing happens again and again. And when you zoom out, you see that this cycle's been happening on autopilot for the last months or even years. And here's the big problem with this: releasing pressure and tension every weekend doesn't actually move you closer to the life you want. It just resets you enough to survive the next week, and then the cycle repeats again and again without you being aware of it. The gap between where you are and the life you actually want keeps on growing, and there's this subtle but nagging feeling of frustration and dissatisfaction with where you're at. So what's actually causing this? There's a few specific factors, and there's a very good chance that this first one is applicable to you without you being aware of it. So number one, poor state regulation. How you manage your stress, emotions, and general well-being. And the real problem here isn't stress. There's always going to be stress in your life. The problem is what you do with it in the moment. And for most guys, the answer is nothing. They let it build instead of dealing with it when it starts to rise. Think of it like a scale. On one side is the stress and pressure building up throughout the day, and the other is a calm and grounded one. To balance it out, you need things like movement, real rest, sunlight, whatever actually brings your state into this relaxed mode. And every time you feel this tension and don't do anything about it, you tip this scale further. And for most guys, this is exactly what happens all week. Outside of work, they're on their phones the second there's a gap, drinking coffee to power through, barely moving, not getting sunlight, eating badly, and not doing anything to tip the scale back. And then they get home from work, and instead of properly resetting, they're straight onto social media, Netflix, and the scale just keeps tipping further. And this is exactly what's feeding this pressure cooker that I talked about earlier, until by Friday it's maxed out and they're just exhausted. And before going on to number two, if you haven't already subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button and give me a like. It really helps to get this message out there to more guys. And there's also a link to a free quiz in the description that will help you uncover any hidden ways that you're wasting your time and energy. So moving on to number two, this is one that you've probably heard 1,000 times and you're sick of hearing, but you still avoid doing it because it requires effort. Having a clear vision of what you actually want in different areas of your life: finance, career, hobbies, lifestyle, dating, social life, and so on. And let's be honest, most guys have very vague goals like, I want to get in shape, I want to have a hot girlfriend, earn more money, but there's nothing actually concrete, broken down into milestones that feel achievable. So the goal feels like a mountain to climb, and they just avoid doing it completely. And you're probably wondering what this has to do with the loop that I was talking about, but here's the connection. Think of your energy as like water, kind of like a river. It doesn't just sit still, it's always going in some direction, intentional or not. So you can use the force of the river to your advantage and create a dam, channeling this energy into powering something. And in your life, this is what the clear vision does. It gives that energy somewhere specific to go. On the other hand, without that dam, the water just takes its own course. It gets pulled downstream and eventually dumps out into the sea, wasted. And in the case of your energy, it gets pulled by distractions, scrolling, mindless nonsense, whatever is easiest and requires the least effort. And then you end up wasting hours a day without even realizing it and stay stuck in this cycle. So this last reason is the one that's probably hardest to admit and stings a bit at first, that you've never actually questioned this pattern. This work hard, enjoy the weekend cycle is the narrative that society tells us is normal. The week is something that we endure and the weekend is where we switch off. Everyone does this, it's pretty normal. But the big problem with this is that it essentially keeps you settling for an average life and thinking that you don't actually deserve more. You start believing that more balanced or exciting lifestyles are just a fantasy or reserved for certain types of people. But in reality, it's completely doable. It just requires a bit of courage, discipline, focus, and going against the grain. So ask yourself, are you playing it too safe and limiting yourself due to mindset and beliefs that you've never actually stopped to question? If this is the case, it's super common, including amongst the guys I work with, which brings me on to this next part, which is what the goal should actually be. And this kind of deviates from the title of the video because the solution isn't just about fixing your weekends. Your weekends are a symptom of a bigger problem, that you're living in autopilot mode, living unconsciously, repeating the same cycles over and over again without being aware of it. This is the enemy here, letting life just happen to you instead of being the master of your own destiny. This is being what I call the reactive man versus the sovereign man. The reactive man's life looks like everything we've just covered. There's no clear vision. His life's unbalanced, lives for the weekend and is stuck in these cycles of distraction and cheap dopamine seeking, constantly having his attention pulled by other things and getting reactive to things out of his control. He blames the fact that he doesn't have time as the problem, when really his time and energy is just leaking in ways that he's not aware of. The sovereign man is different. He lives life on his own terms in the most authentic way possible to him, which is different for every single person, by the way. He knows how to manage his time. He knows how to manage his stress and emotions, and he's in control of his time and energy and channels this consciously into creating the life he actually wants, rather than just following this narrative that society gave him. And for me, this meant moving to Brazil, completely immersing myself in a different culture and language. And people in the UK thought I was crazy. It went completely against the narrative I'd been brought up with, but it felt right for me. It was a conscious choice and it ultimately paid off. And this is exactly what this channel is about, helping guys build the sovereign version of themselves, take control of their time and energy. And the first thing you need to do is actually start becoming aware of these energy leaks you have. You can only redirect your time and energy when you actually know where it's going, which is exactly what the quiz in the description will help you do. And speaking of the most common blind spots when it comes to these energy leaks, watch this video next. It's going to show you where most guys are bleeding their time and energy without them realizing.